This lesson will focus on the skill of identifying diction and exploring how diction is helpful in creating characters. So the first thing that you need to know is what the word diction means. Diction is picking very good word choices, using very specific vocabulary to create feelings associated with that word or connotations of that word. So there are thousands of words in the English language, but many of them are too vague. So for instance, if you say, "I feel good," what does that mean? Do you feel healthy? Are you content? Are you particularly happy about something? It's just too vague and it simply doesn't cut it. So you have to work on picking word choices that convey something very specific. So if you say that you're excited because you won the lottery, that's really quite an understatement. You're going to want to choose a word like ecstatic or overjoyed. Those words are much more specific and they convey more clearly your feelings and your emotions. So diction helps to make your language more exciting. Nobody wants to hear that something is good or bad or happy or sad. They're not exciting words. So try selecting words that are more specific. So don't say that a man is very tired, call him exhausted. Don't write very sad, write morose. Those word choices will make your language a bit more flowery and exciting to read. It also helps you express your point more clearly. A lot of good word choices are degrees of very vague words. So cold is vague. Chilly also means cold, but just a little bit cold. So if you're chilly, you're not terribly uncomfortable. Freezing, on the other hand, means that you're very cold. So simply pick the word that's most appropriate to the feeling that you're trying to convey. It also helps set the tone of your piece and create mood. And lastly, it helps to establish elements of a story like setting and character. And that last one is the one we're going to focus on today when we analyze how John Steinbeck uses diction to create his characters in Of Mice and Men. So characterization can happen in two ways. First, it can be very direct. So this is when an author tells us exactly what a character is like. So Steinbeck could have just said that Curly is extremely aggressive. He likes to fight with people, but he doesn't do that. Instead, he characterizes Curly indirectly. So he gives us little hints or clues about Curly, but the reader has to then infer for him or herself what he's actually like. And the way that he does that is in a number of ways. First of all, we have a physical description. So what does the character actually look like? How does he stand? What are some of his features like? Also the character's speech. What the character says is going to give us a glimpse into his personality. What the character does is also going to give us a hint about what kind of a character he or she is. The character's interaction with other characters, so the way that he reacts to what people say or how other characters react to what he says. And lastly, what other characters say about him. So perhaps two other characters in the novel might have a conversation about that character, allowing the readers to get a feel for what he's really like. So what we're going to do now is take a look at Chapter 2 of Mice and Men. And again, we're going to focus on Curly for right now. And this excerpt details the first time that we meet Curly. This is right when he walks in. So we're going to read through it first, and then we'll point out some good specific word choices so you can see how diction helps build character. At that moment, a young man came into the bunkhouse, a thin young man with a brown face, with brown eyes and a head of tightly curled hair. He wore a work glove on his left hand, and, like the boss, he wore high-heeled boots. His eyes passed over the new men and he stopped. He glanced coldly at George and then at Lenny. His arms gradually bent at the elbows and his hands closed into fists. He stiffened and went into a slight crouch. His glance was at once calculating and pugnacious. Lenny squirmed under the look and shifted his feet nervously. Curly stepped gingerly close to him. "Let the big guy talk." Lenny twisted with embarrassment. George said, "Suppose he don't want to talk." Curly lashed his body around. "By Christ, he's gotta talk when he's spoke to." Curly stared levelly at him. "Well, next time you answer when you're spoke to." He turned toward the door and walked out, and his elbows were bent out a little. Okay, so the first thing that we might notice is a physical attribute. He has tightly curled hair. This might seem pretty insignificant, and you might say to yourself, well, that's just what his hair is like. But no, Steinbeck could have given this guy any kind of hair he wanted, but he made a point of saying that this guy's hair is tightly curled. It's tightly wound up, just like Curly is. His personality is tightly wound. It's coarse, it's rough, it's abrasive. So this is our first clue that gives us an insight into his personality. Also, the fact that he wears high-heeled boots like the boss, like his father, shows us something about Curly. Remember, these guys work on a ranch. High-heeled boots are really impractical. They're laborers. But Curly is trying to make the distinction that he's not a laborer. He's not like the rest of the guys. He's the boss's son. And therefore, he doesn't have to work as hard, and he can get away with whatever he wants. So he wears those boots to distinguish himself from the rest of the group. He wants everyone to know that he's sort of in charge and he can get away with anything. Now, his glance. You may have noticed that Steinbeck mentions his glance several times throughout this small passage. He glances coldly at George and then at Lenny. He's never seen these guys before. This is the first time that he's laying eyes on them, and he's looking at them in a way that shows they're not welcome. He wants them to know, I don't want you here. So he looks at them in a very cold manner. His arms are gradually bent at the elbows, and his hands are closed into fists. Remember, Curly's a boxer. He's always looking to start a fight, and we can see that just in the way that he's standing. His arms are bent at the elbows, he's got his fists clenched, he's ready to go. He's looking to start a fight with these guys. Also, the fact that he stiffens and he's in a slight crouch, that's very telling of his personality. It shows that he's poised and he's ready for aggression at any moment. His glance is again described as calculating and pugnacious. The word calculating suggests that Curly is sizing these guys up. He's taking a look at them, he's kind of measuring, saying to himself, can I take this guy? He's sizing them up and he's getting ready to fight them. And the word pugnacious, that's a great SAT word. It means inclined to quarrel or fight readily. It's combative. Now, one of the other things we've discussed is that a character is also built by the author explaining the other character's reactions to that character. So we can see here that Lenny is extremely intimidated by Curly and very uncomfortable. He squirms under Curly's look. He shifts his feet nervously. He twists with embarrassment. Okay, all of those things indicate that he's afraid of Curly. He doesn't want to start anything, and those word choices tell us that. Now, George sticks up for his friend by saying, suppose he don't want to talk, and Curly's reaction to that is quite violent. He lashes his body around in response to George's comment, and we can see through the author's word choice that he's quite surprised and taken aback by George speaking out against him. He doesn't like this. He whips himself around and says, by Christ, he's got to talk when he's spoke to. So that line is really Curly reasserting his dominance. He's saying in less words to these guys that they must answer to him. And with this line, he warns George to back down, and he reiterates to Lenny that he needs to pay him the respect of answering. Again, Steinbeck mentions his stare. He stares levelly at these guys, and he says that they will answer to him, reestablishing that he is in charge. And lastly, when he walks out, his arms are bent out a little. So the repetition of that is important. The fact that Steinbeck thinks his elbows are worth mentioning again should tell the reader that this is a significant gesture. His gait is that of a tough guy, almost as if he imagines his biceps as bigger than they actually are. So now we're going to take a look at Curly's wife. We also meet her in Chapter 2, and again, we're going to read through this and then pick out the diction that helps us understand who she is as a character. She had full rouged lips and wide-spaced eyes, heavily made up. Her fingernails were red. Her hair hung in little rolled clusters like sausages. She wore a cotton house dress and red mules, on the insteps of which were little bouquets of red ostrich feathers. Her voice had a nasal, brittle quality. George looked away from her and then back. She put her hands behind her back and leaned against the door frame so that her body was thrown forward. Lenny's eyes moved down over her body, and though she did not seem to be looking at Lenny, she bridled a little. She looked at her fingernails. Sometimes Curly's in here, she explained. If he ain't, I guess I better look someplace else, she said playfully. Lenny watched her, fascinated. She smiled archly and twitched her body. She turned her head. Hi, Slim, she said. Slim's voice came through the door. Hi, good-lookin'. I'm trying to find Curly, Slim. Well, you ain't trying very hard. I seen him going in your house. She was suddenly apprehensive. Bye, boys, she called into the bunkhouse, and she hurried away. George looked around at Lenny. Jesus, what a tramp, he said. So that's what Curly picks for a wife. She's purty, said Lenny defensively. Yeah, and she's sure hiding it. Okay, so again, we're going to start with the appearance of this girl. She's all dolled up. She has lipstick on, she's heavily made up, and the color red also appears a lot. She has red fingernails, red shoes, and red ostrich feathers coming out of those shoes. The color red draws attention. The fact that this girl is dressed in all red suggests that she wants attention from these guys. She wants to be noticed. She's walking around a farm in a dress with her hair all done, her makeup all done, with these fancy shoes with ostrich feathers coming out of them. There's no reason for her to walk around a farm like that. It's actually sort of ridiculous. But she does it to draw attention to herself. So we can infer from her outfit and from her very ostentatious sort of appearance that she's looking for attention. Then Steinbeck mentions her voice as being nasal and brittle, almost like it's fake or phony. The word brittle suggests that there's not too much substance behind it. It's almost like she's putting on a voice and being a little fake or ultra feminine. Now, George's reaction to her is to immediately look away. So remember how we discussed other characters' reactions to that character and how they tell us something about her. So George looks away. He can see immediately what this girl is after. He knows she's looking for attention and he does not want to tangle with Curly. So he looks away from her, but then he looks back again because she is an attractive girl. Now her stance, we saw that Curly was poised to fight. She stands against a door frame, throwing her body forward. So she's sort of thrusting her chest out again. She's trying to draw attention to herself and be flirtatious. She wants these guys to notice her. And poor Lenny, he doesn't know any better than to just keep staring at her. He doesn't look away like George does. His eyes are moving up and down all over her body. He's pretty much enthralled by her. Steinbeck also mentions that while she doesn't appear to notice Lenny gawking, she bridles a little. She knows he's looking, and she likes it. She gets excited. She likes the fact that someone's looking at her, gawking at her. Then she has this conversation with the guys saying that she's looking for her husband, and the author makes sure to use the word playfully. She's saying this very playfully to them. Well, if he ain't here, I guess I better look someplace else. So again, she's just sort of flirting with these guys. Now, in describing Lenny, the author makes an excellent choice in diction by choosing the word fascinated. He's mesmerized by her. He does not look away like the other guys, and he's completely taken by her. And she, of course, smiles archly, which suggests that she knows what she's doing. And it also suggests that she thinks she's sort of above these guys. She twitches her body. The word twitch also suggests a very flirtatious sort of mood. Then we come to a conversation between Curly's wife and Slim, and the conversation is quite telling about her character and the relationship between the two of them. She says, "Hi, Slim," and he responds, "Hi, good lookin'." Now, this should have stood out to you because the rest of these guys are afraid to even look at her. And here's Slim saying, "Hi, good lookin'." He's sort of using a cute little pet name. He's not really afraid of her at all. And this shows that he's not intimidated by Curly either. He's not afraid of Curly. He's trying to be friendly and even kind to Curly's wife, and maybe even return her flirtations. Everyone else is really mean to her, and they just tell her to get out. They won't even look at her. Slim gives her respect, and is even a little bit playful back to her. It's a harmless dialogue, but it does show us something about both Slim's character and Curly's wife. Now, when Slim says to her, "You must not be trying very hard to look for your husband because I just saw him going in your house," she suddenly becomes apprehensive. This word apprehensive suggests that she's afraid of Curly. He's home, which means he's probably looking for her. Knowing a bit about Curly and seeing his wife's reaction to Slim's comment suggests that Curly is perhaps abusive to his wife. If she becomes nervous to learn he's at home, we know that she has a reason to feel worried. He's going to be looking for her, and he's soon going to discover that she's not there. So she leaves, but not before saying, "Bye, boys," another flirtatious sort of comment before leaving the room. Immediately after she leaves, George calls her a tramp. He does this to establish to the rest of the guys that he wants nothing to do with her. By putting her down, he is going to, in a way, buy him some security among the rest of the men. They all band together in their avoidance of her. But interestingly, Lenny says in defense of her, she's purty. So when George puts her down, Lenny defends her. Lenny doesn't see, like the other men see, that she's up to no good and she can get him in trouble. Also, the word purty is worth mentioning. Part of diction is analyzing the dialect used in novels or stories. These guys are from the South. It's the 1930s, and you might have noticed from the way that they talk that it's a little bit, there's a lot of slang. So for example, they call all of their personal belongings a bindle. They talk about getting the jack together or money. All of these word choices, all of this jargon indicates something about the characters. So a lot of times word choices can indicate what part of the country the characters are living in, what time period the characters are living in, which all gives us some insight into who these men are. So make sure you pay attention to those words and phrases. And last but not least, George says, yeah, and she's sure trying to hide it. And hopefully you were able to pick up on the sarcasm in that line. So he's basically saying that she knows she's pretty, and she's putting it in all of their faces. So what I would like you guys to do is write me a paragraph. Just one well-organized, well-developed paragraph in which you characterize a well-known character from a movie. I want you to use very specific vocabulary to describe that character. Tell me a bit about his or her physical appearance, and don't just tell me that the character has brown hair and brown eyes. Tell me something about his or her personality. Tell me something about their interactions with other characters in the movie. Tell me how characters feel about that character as well. So pay attention to your diction, pay attention to your word choices, and be prepared to talk some more about diction and characterization in Of Mice and Men for our next class. And remember, in life, the test comes first, and learning the lesson follows.